I was the loser cousin at family events, until I showed up with my billion-dollar app. Thanksgiving at Grandma's house was always the same. Same honey-glazed turkey, same passive-aggressive small talk, same too-warm living room with the thermostat set to Florida in July. I stood in the corner of the over-decorated living room, cradling a paper plate with a slice of dry turkey and exactly one green bean. The cousins had already formed their elite circle near the fireplace, laughing, sipping wine, exchanging humble brags like Pokemon cards. "Zach just made junior partner," Aunt Linda said, her voice floating over the classical music and turkey fumes. "Only 30 and already handling billion-dollar mergers." Zach smirked. "It's just a grind, you know." I was pretty sure I hadn't showered that morning. I tugged at the collar of my too big Walmart button-down and tried to smile as Daniel, the future cardiac surgeon, launched into a story about saving a guy's life during his rotation. Megan jumped in, talking about the AI tools her team was building at some shiny Silicon Valley tech giant. They talked like adults, like people who belonged in glossy alumni magazines. And then there was me, Elliot, 22, skinny, tired, and somehow still breaking out like a high schooler. I was between jobs, between ideas, between lives. At least that's how they saw it. "So Elliot," Megan said suddenly, with a smile that was too polite to be genuine, "what are you working on these days?" A pause. Zach snorted into his wine glass. "Still biking around town delivering pizzas?" Aunt Linda chimed in without looking up from her plate. "You know, some people just take longer to bloom. You just keep trying, sweetheart." "Right," I said, my face burning as I forced a chuckle. Still figuring things out. Inside, I felt like I was being skinned alive with a butter knife. Grandma shuffled over with her usual elegance and a plate of overcooked stuffing. "Elliot, sweetheart, have some more. You look thin. Are you eating enough?" "Sure, Grandma, thanks." She meant well, but even she couldn't hide the little wince when Zach mentioned his condo in Boston, or when Megan casually dropped her Tesla Model Y into conversation. To her, I was the grandchild she worried about, not because she didn't love me, but because everyone else gave her a reason not to. I excused myself to get some air and slipped into the hallway, leaning against the faded wallpaper next to the family photos. Zach in his Yale cap, Megan shaking hands with a Google exec, Daniel with a stethoscope. Then I heard it. "He still doesn't have a real job?" Daniel's voice hushed, coming from the dining room. "He's like, allergic to ambition," Zach whispered back, laughing. "It's kind of sad. He's just..." "Elliot," Megan added, as if that explained everything. They didn't even bother whispering lower. I stared at the photo of myself from years ago, gap-toothed, holding a plastic science trophy. I remembered that day. I'd been so sure I was going to change the world. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I knew how they saw me, the odd one out, the family embarrassment, a cautionary tale dressed in clearance clothes, a loser. But what they didn't know was that 2 weeks earlier, I'd quietly launched something small, something glitchy, something only I believed in. An app I'd been building for over a year, between pizza deliveries, between broken laptops, between panic attacks. And soon, they'd all know. The basement smelled like old cardboard, dust, and the faint, comforting hint of my grandma's lavender detergent. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. A tiny kingdom of half-drained coffee mugs, code-covered sticky notes, and one battered laptop with a fan that whined like a dying cat every time I opened more than 3 browser tabs. This was where the loser cousin lived. I sat cross-legged on a threadbare rug between stacks of holiday decorations and yellowed encyclopedias, staring at lines of code through bloodshot eyes. My fingers danced over the keyboard as I pushed the latest update to the app. Still buggy, still ugly, but slowly getting there. The app was called Loop. The idea was simple: optimize hyperlocal deliveries for small businesses without the bloated fees of big-name platforms. Restaurants, florists, even independent bookstores. They'd manage dispatch through Loop, cutting out the middlemen and giving couriers more control. Nobody believed in it. Not my cousins, not my family, not even most of the strangers online. But I did, And Max. Try line 48 again, Max's voice crackled through my headset. He was in Montreal, on Discord, wrapped in a hoodie and chewing something loudly. You've got a syntax error in the root calculation. You sure? I muttered, rubbing my temples. I've been sure for the past 45 minutes. I sighed and made the change. The preview refreshed, the map adjusted perfectly, and the delivery routes lit up like arteries in a body. I grinned. Dude, I whispered, it worked. No kidding, Max said, deadpan. You're welcome, that's like 10 hours of my Canadian life I'm not getting back. You're getting stock options. I want t-shirts. We both laughed. Max wasn't just a coder, he was my sanity. We'd met on a tech subreddit, started DMing, and somehow he stuck around. Through every crash, every failed version, every night I nearly gave up. Seriously, Elliot, he said, his voice a little softer now. You're not crazy. You're just playing the long game. The long game. I looked around the basement, past the piles of old jigsaw puzzles and boxes labeled Christmas Lights 1999, and wondered if the long game had an expiration date. The door creaked open, and I looked up. Grandma descended the stairs slowly, balancing a plate of grilled cheese sandwiches and a glass of orange juice. She was wearing her usual floral blouse and slippers that squeaked on the steps. I brought you something to eat, she said, setting the plate on a nearby box. Thanks, Grandma, I smiled. She was the only one who never made me feel like I was wasting oxygen. She looked around at the screens, the cables, the notes pinned to the concrete wall. You're still down here, she said, more observation than question. Yeah, I nodded. Just working on something. She sat down beside me, tucking her hands into her lap. You've been working hard, I see that. I don't always understand it, but I see it. I felt my throat tighten a little. She meant well, always did. But sweetheart, she added gently, don't take this the wrong way, okay? Maybe it wouldn't hurt to think about college again. You're smart, Elliot. Maybe you just need a different environment. There it was. The same question, wrapped in love instead of judgment. That's why it hurt more. She nodded, rubbing my arm. I hope it does. I really do. But if it doesn't, you still have a place here. As she left, I stared at the screen, the blinking cursor like a heartbeat. Maybe she was right. Maybe it wouldn't work. But maybe, just maybe, it would. Rain came down in icy sheets, soaking through my thin delivery jacket and turning my sneakers into sponges. The streets of downtown felt colder than usual, and not just because of the weather. I stood on the curb outside the dispatch office, holding a pink slip in one hand and a busted umbrella in the other. You're late again, Elliot, my manager barked, not even looking at me as he slammed the door behind him. We need people who can actually show up, not ones who disappear in the middle of shifts to work on their little apps. It was one delivery. Doesn't matter. You're out. Turn in your badge and bike key. That was it. No final warning, no thanks for your time. Just out in the rain with a paper that might as well have said you failed. I didn't argue. What was the point? I walked away slowly, water dripping down my neck, each step heavier than the last. By the time I got home, my clothes clung to my skin and my fingers were numb. Our little house felt quiet. Too quiet. Grandma wasn't there. She'd collapsed that morning, dizzy, confused. The neighbor had called 911 when I was out on a delivery run. By the time I got to the ER, she was already admitted. Observation, they said. Could be blood pressure, could be more. The bills were already piling up on the kitchen counter. I stared at them like they might disappear if I blinked hard enough. $628.77 for meds. $1,200 for the ambulance. Another $900 estimate for 2 nights in a shared hospital room. And Loop? Still unfinished, still glitchy. No users, no investors. Just Max and me, trying to duct tape our dreams together. I sat on the sagging couch in the living room, dripping water onto the carpet. The heater kicked on with a groan, but the place still felt cold. The front door rattled. It was Mrs. Jensen from next door, the one who always baked cookies for her cats and complained about all that noise coming from the basement. Elliot, she sniffed, holding a casserole in aluminum foil. Just wanted to drop this off, but maybe, and I say this kindly, maybe it's time to get a real job. Your grandmother always said you were smart. Don't waste it chasing apps. I forced a smile, nodded politely, and shut the door before she could say God bless. I didn't eat the casserole. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. The house creaked, the pipes moaned. Somewhere outside, a car alarm chirped, then died. Inside my head, the worst voices started talking. Maybe they were right. Maybe you really are a failure. You had one idea, and it's not even working. I closed my eyes. I could hear Zach's voice, smug and perfect. Dude, you're 24 and you live in a basement. That's not grit. That's delusion. I nearly quit. I hovered over the delete repository button on GitHub. I opened Craigslist, typed entry-level jobs, hovered over a dishwasher posting. And then, my laptop dinged. An email. Subject line, Re-loop demo. Impressive work. I blinked, heart skipping. I clicked. Hey Elliot, saw your demo on the startup sub. Noticed your handle a few times. I don't usually do this. I'm not a big shot VC, just a guy who made a few lucky crypto bets. But I think you've got something. I'm in for $15,000. No strings, just keep building. Greg M. I stared at the screen, then read it 3 times. I thought maybe it was a scam. But then the next email came, a Stripe receipt, $15,000. Already transferred. I sat frozen for a full minute. Then I laughed the kind of laugh that makes your ribs ache and your chest shake. I wasn't rich. Not yet. But I wasn't dead in the water either. Someone believed in me. A stranger. First time in weeks, I slept without hearing the word loser. Tomorrow, I'd fix the bugs. Tomorrow, I'd call Max. Tomorrow, we'd keep building. Because maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point. The cafe smelled like burnt espresso and cinnamon muffins. It was the kind of place that tried to be trendy but never quite got there. Mismatched chairs, a chalkboard menu, and a rusty free Wi-Fi sign that had seen better days. It was also the first real business willing to try my app. Gina, the owner, wiped her hands on her apron as she leaned over the counter to look at my phone. She was in her early 50s, always wearing big earrings and no-nonsense glasses. So this thing tells me where to deliver, in what order, and optimizes the route, she asked, narrowing her eyes at the screen. Exactly, I said, heart pounding. You put in the addresses for your deliveries, and it figures out the fastest route for your driver. Less zigzagging around town. It even tracks traffic updates. She tapped her chin. You built this yourself? Max and I said. He's in Canada. Back-end dev. Back-end dev, she repeated, as if tasting the words. Then she smiled. Well, what the hell? Our current system is me yelling at my nephew over the phone. Let's give your app a shot. I exhaled. You won't regret it. We sat down at one of the sticky tables and walked through the setup. She entered her cafe's daily orders, and Loop generated a delivery route in seconds. Gina raised an eyebrow. That fast? Yeah, and it updates in real time if someone cancels or adds an order. Gina called over her nephew, a grumpy 20-something in a hoodie named Kyle. He glanced at the app, shrugged, and took the phone. 2 hours later, they had completed their first 10 deliveries. No delays, no complaints, no wrong turns. That night, Gina sent me a text. This actually works. Your app saved us at least an hour. Thanks, Elliot. I stared at the message for a while. Then I grinned. Back at the house, the basement had changed. The cobwebs were mostly gone, replaced by a whiteboard covered in flowcharts and sticky notes. I'd found some old tech posters at a thrift store. One with a faded Steve Jobs quote, another with a rocket ship and the words launch or die. Max and I were on a video call, his camera flickering a bit as usual. He looked as tired as I felt, but he was smiling. So, he asked. 10 orders. No crashes. Gina loved it. Hell yeah, he said, punching the air. We've got traction. I laughed. It felt foreign, like I hadn't used those muscles in months. We should add a favorites feature, I said. She mentioned she has regulars who order the same thing every week. Noted. I'll write a draft tonight. Max paused. You're doing it, man. This thing might actually work. I didn't say anything for a second. I just nodded. Later that night, I left the basement to get some air. I walked 2 blocks down to a late-night noodle stand I used to deliver from. The same guy was there, still playing music off his phone, still tossing noodles like he was in a kung fu movie. 1 pork, extra chili, I said. He handed it over without looking. $5. I sat on the curb, steam rising from the cup, and watched the street. For the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full of possibility, of momentum, of a future that wasn't just theoretical. I took a bite, wincing at the heat, and smiled. Loop 1 was live, and someone out there was using something I made. Maybe I wasn't the loser cousin anymore, not yet. But maybe... soon. The office didn't look like I imagined. No marble floors or giant windows with skyline views. Just a converted loft downtown, exposed brick walls, mismatched chairs, and a coffee machine that looked way too fancy for anyone to actually use. But I was here, in person, pitching. I smoothed down my hair, freshly cut for the first time in months, and opened my new MacBook. It had cost more than my first car, but it didn't overheat every 15 minutes, and that already made it worth it. Across from me sat Marla Hale, VC heavyweight, early investor in 3 unicorns, wore leather jackets to board meetings and never touched a notepad. Everything she needed was stored in her head, sharp and fast, and always 5 steps ahead. So, she said, tapping her fingers on the armrest. This is Loop. I nodded. Yeah. Real-time delivery optimization. We've got 5 pilot clients, 100 active users, 0 churn in month 1. Marla leaned back. You don't look like a CEO. My stomach twisted, but before I could respond, she smiled. That's why I'm interested. The ones who look the part are usually too busy performing to build something real. She stood and walked over to the window, arms crossed. I saw your deck. It's not pretty, but it's smart. You've been scrappy, resourceful. You didn't raise a cent until you had users. That's rare. She turned to face me. Let's talk numbers. I'll lead your pre-seed. $500,000. You scale your dev team, lock in your current clients, and expand into 2 more cities in the next 6 months. My brain froze. I'd rehearsed this moment in my head 1,000 times. What to say, what not to say. But all that came out was, wait. You're serious? Marla grinned. You're going to need a lawyer. And a decent accountant. And someone who knows UI UX, because this thing looks like it was designed in 2004. I coded the front end myself, I muttered. Exactly. She slid a folder across the table. Call me when you're ready to sign. That night, back in the basement, I held the folder like it was made of gold. It practically was. Max was on video, sipping from a Slurpee and grinning like an idiot. Holy shtent, he said. This is real, it's happening. I know, I said, barely above a whisper. We stayed on the call for hours making lists, who we'd hire, what servers we needed, whether we'd finally get an actual office with sunlight. By 3 a.m. I wasn't even tired. I felt like I'd had 3 cups of espresso and a lightning bolt to the chest. 3 weeks later, Loop moved out of the basement. We got a tiny co-working space above a laundromat, but it had windows and a working coffee machine, and that felt like luxury. We hired our first 3 people, a front-end dev, a customer success rep, and a guy who could finally make the app look modern. Orders doubled, then tripled. Gina referred us to 2 other cafes. One of those cafes had a cousin in New York who ran a small fleet of local groceries. Suddenly we were testing in 2 cities. Then came the email, from a big player, one of the giants. They wanted a meeting. Their tone was polite, but the subtext was clear. Nice little app you've got there. Want to sell before we crush you? Max was nervous. They'll offer 7 figures, maybe 8. I sat with it for a night. I thought about the cousins, about that Thanksgiving, about the look in Zach's eyes when he asked me if I was still biking around for tips. And I thought about the 10 users who'd messaged us last week to say, "Your app saved me tonight. Thank you." The next morning I declined the meeting. By month 5 we had 20 employees. Loop was being used in 4 cities. The press started noticing. "The app that's saving local deliveries," one headline read. I didn't tell anyone in the family, not yet. I wanted to wait. To show up, one day, at another Thanksgiving. Not as the loser cousin in the corner, but as someone they'd never see coming. The email hit my inbox at 8:03 a.m., subject line in all caps like my aunt always did. "Don't forget, Grandma's 80th next month." I stared at the screen, sipping black coffee from a branded Loop mug someone on the team had made as a joke. The message was short, overly cheerful, with a big animated cake gif and a passive-aggressive sign-off. "Hope you can make time now that you're such a busy bee. Aunt Carol." My first instinct was to ignore it. Delete, archive, pretend it got lost in spam. I hadn't seen most of them in over 2 years. Not since I was Elliot the dropout, the guy who wasted potential and biked around town like a DoorDash donkey. But then I leaned back in my chair and glanced at the framed check on the wall, $500,000, from Marla Hale Ventures, signed and dated. Maybe it was time. Later that day I brought it up to Max during our check-in call, said casually, my aunt emailed. "Grandma's turning 80. Max raised an eyebrow. "And you're thinking of going?" "I don't know," I said. "Would be the first time they see me since the basement days." There was a pause, then Max grinned. "You're totally going." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to. I know that look." I sighed. "Yeah, I guess I am." He leaned forward toward his webcam. "Okay, but important question. Are we talking subtle entrance or full-on dramatic movie return?" I smirked. "I was thinking, Porsche." Max burst out laughing. "Oh my God. Yes. Arrive like a Bond villain. Just remember to put on the 'I'm still humble, I swear' face, and maybe bring the team," I added. "Let them see what a real startup failure looks like now." Max made a mock-serious face. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" He pointed at the screen. "Don't gloat. Gloat silently." The next morning, I met with Jonathan, our in-house counsel and recent hire from a fancy downtown firm. He looked up from his laptop. "So, this family trip, any reason we should be nervous? Like you secretly gave away equity to your cousin in exchange for Hot Pockets or something?" I laughed. "No, just personal closure." Jonathan shrugged. "Well, if you need to rent something dramatic, I know a guy who does vintage cars. Very Silicon Valley founder chic." I paused. "Actually, yeah, set it up." He looked surprised. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Jonathan smiled, then typed something into his phone. "Done. Porsche 911 black matte finish. Just don't park it on your grandma's lawn." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. 2 years ago, I'd done the same thing. Only then I was calculating how many deliveries I needed to make to pay for her prescriptions. Now I was planning my return like it was a scene from a movie. But it wasn't about showing off. Not really. It was about walking into that room and knowing, truly knowing, that I didn't need their approval anymore, and that I'd built something no one could take away. Not even family. The Porsche purred to a stop outside my grandmother's house, its matte black finish catching the afternoon sun just enough to make heads turn. I stepped out slowly, sunglasses on, tailored navy coat swaying just slightly with the breeze. The grass in the big backyard was freshly cut, the air thick with the smell of grilled chicken and nostalgia. Strings of paper lanterns crisscrossed above the folding chairs and plastic tables, and a giant banner read, "Happy 80th, Grandma Irene." Beside me, Jonathan stepped out first, clean-shaven, crisp shirt, no tie, Behind him came Kira in a beige jumpsuit and heels that definitely weren't made for grass, and Trevor last, hauling a camera bag slung across his back like it was part of him. The music quieted as we approached the gate. A few people turned, then a few more. The conversations didn't stop so much as slow, like the moment before a wave breaks. I heard someone whisper, "Is that?" Then louder, from somewhere on the left, one of my cousins said what everyone was thinking. "Wait, is that Elliot?" Laughter rippled from the patio. Uncertain, awkward. Another voice added, "Did he win the lottery or something?" I took off my sunglasses slowly, like I'd rehearsed it. "Hey guys," I said with a small grin. "Long time." No one knew how to respond. Aunt Carol, always the first to fill silence, rushed forward with a platter of cupcakes. "Elliot, you made it," she said in a voice just a little too high. Her eyes darted toward the Porsche, then the camera bag, then back to me. "We didn't know you were bringing friends." "This is my team," I said casually. "Jonathan, Kira, Trevor, we're building something together." She blinked. "Oh, well, wonderful." Then she lowered her voice. "Your grandmother will be so happy to see you. But, maybe don't film too much, okay? You know how she gets." Trevor gave her a thumbs up. "No worries. Just here for the vibes." We moved deeper into the yard. I spotted my cousins standing near the buffet, all wearing similar off-the-rack suits in varying shades of uncomfortable. They looked like a failed boy band reunion. One of them, Troy, I think, nudged the other. "Dude," he muttered, "he's like, cool now?" I couldn't help but smile. Grandma hadn't come outside yet. A few of the older aunts were watching us like we were from a different planet. Then I heard a small voice behind me. "Elliot?" I turned. It was my niece, Emma, now tall enough to look me almost in the eye. She stared at me, wide-eyed. "You look different." I knelt down just a little. "Better or worse?" She grinned. "Way cooler." I ruffled her hair. "That's the right answer." Just then the sliding glass door opened, and Grandma Irene stepped out slowly, guided by a younger cousin. Everyone clapped, and the attention shifted to her like sunlight through clouds. She looked around the yard, smiling, until her eyes landed on me. There was a pause. Then her face lit up. She raised one hand and said, "There's my boy." Everyone turned. And in that moment, under a string of warm lights and surprised stares, I felt it. Not pride, exactly. Something simpler. Closure. I walked up to her and hugged her gently. She whispered in my ear, "You finally made it, huh?" I pulled back and looked her in the eye. "I did, Grandma," I said. "I really did." The long folding table was set with mismatched plates, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and a store-bought chocolate cake with Happy 80th, Irene written in pink icing. Plastic champagne flutes clinked lazily as stories passed between generations. The string lights above us flickered faintly with the breeze. I sat between Grandma and Jonathan, my plate mostly untouched. Across from me were my cousins, Troy, Eric, and Melissa, stuffing their faces like this was any other Sunday. "Hey, Elliot," Troy said, half chewing. "So, what do you actually do now? Influencer? Crypto? Still in that basement?" Melissa snorted. "Maybe he just hired people to look impressive." Laughter. A few aunts chuckled along, not maliciously, just that same old tone of mild condescension I'd grown up hearing. I took a sip of water and smiled. "No, I left the basement about a year ago." Eric leaned forward. "So seriously, is it like a real job?" Grandma shifted beside me, her hand gently patting mine under the table. I could feel how tense she was. Even now, she wanted them to be kind. She didn't want drama, so I gave her the gift of calm. "I'm the founder and CEO of a logistics platform for local businesses," I said. "It helps optimize deliveries, reduce emissions, and improve margins. We launched just over a year ago." A few cousins blinked. "You built an app?" Melissa asked, unimpressed. "Yes," I replied. "But more importantly, I built a team. And now we're operating in over 40 cities, Troy raised an eyebrow. Wait, is this like an actual company? I nodded, then glanced around the table, made sure people were listening. Even the clinking had stopped. Forks hung in midair. We just closed our Series A, I said, my voice even. Valuation came in at $1.2 billion. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, clatter. A fork hit the floor. Aunt Carol gasped. Uncle Dave stopped mid-sip of his boxed wine. My little niece, Emma, whispered a drawn-out whoa. Jonathan remained still, calm, used to these numbers. Kira smiled into her drink. Grandma turned to me, her eyes already glassy. You're serious? Someone murmured. I nodded. Dead serious. No arrogance. Just fact. I looked around, letting it settle. I remember, I said, when I used to come to family dinners and everyone would ask when I was going to get a real job. A few people shifted in their seats. No one laughed this time. I remember being told to be more like my cousins. That ambition was fine, but stability was better. My eyes landed on Troy. He looked away. But I also remember the silence, the disbelief, the eye rolls when I said I was working on something. When I skipped parties or didn't want to talk about school. I remember it all. Grandma placed her hand over mine again, tighter this time. I saw the tears on her cheeks glinting under the soft lights. So, I said gently, thank you. They looked at me, confused. Thank you, I repeated, for not believing in me, for doubting, for laughing. Pause. That became fuel, and that was the truth. Every jab, every shrug, every dinner I left early to go back to coding in that freezing basement. Those weren't setbacks, they were sparks. I don't need anyone's apology, I added. I'm just glad I kept going. I leaned back, finally lifting my fork. Troy cleared his throat. I mean, that's cool, man, congrats. Melissa gave a small, polite clap. The others followed, a little stiff, a little uncertain. But it didn't matter. Grandma wiped her cheeks and leaned in close. I always believed in you, she whispered. Even when I didn't understand what you were doing, I turned to her, voice thick. I know, Grandma. You fed me when I couldn't feed myself. You let me stay in that basement, that company. It started with you. She nodded and smiled. And then, with a shaky hand, she raised her glass. To Elliot, she said. Everyone followed. And for the first time in my life, the toast was for me. The party didn't end right away, but something shifted. Same fairy lights, same folding chairs, same casserole dishes on the buffet table. But now the faces around me looked different, warmer, more cautious. Curious, yes, but laced with something else. Respect. I stepped away from the table for air, holding a half-empty glass of champagne. The backyard smelled like grass and citronella candles. I barely made it 2 steps before Troy caught up. Hey, Elliot, he said, suddenly all smiles. That was huge, seriously. I nodded, waiting. He rubbed the back of his neck. Listen, I've been thinking about pivoting out of my sales job, just not fulfilling, you know? You guys hiring, like I could send over a resume? He pulled a folded paper from his blazer. He'd come prepared. I took it without looking at it. Thanks, Troy. We're always open to talent. Just have the team submit it through the site. His face flickered. He'd hoped for something easier. Right, totally. You just have that kind of vibe now, like a real CEO. Before I could answer, Melissa sidled up next to us. Elliot, she said, her tone butter smooth. I've always said you were different. I raised an eyebrow. She laughed nervously. No, seriously. I mean, I didn't get it before, but now, it's inspiring. Actually, I've been thinking of starting my own brand. Like, lifestyle-focused? You think your app could help me launch deliveries? I gave her the same answer. We help small businesses all the time. Send me the details. The team can take a look. They both smiled too wide, thanked me too eagerly. Across the yard, Aunt Linda stood awkwardly by the lemonade table, twisting a napkin in her hand. When I looked her way, she gave me a hesitant wave. I walked over. Elliot. she said, almost whispering. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. Really. We were maybe a little hard on you before. We just didn't know. I smiled, genuinely this time. It's okay. No, it's not, she said, looking down. But thank you for not turning your back on us. I had to build a thick skin, I said. But I didn't build a hard heart. She blinked fast, then nodded. Later I sat beside Grandma, who had changed into her softer slippers and wrapped herself in a shawl. The night had cooled. You handled them with grace, she said quietly. I had a good example. She reached for my hand, held it with both of hers. I always knew you'd be something, she said, voice trembling slightly. But I never imagined you'd become someone everyone else wanted to be. I didn't respond right away. I just squeezed her hand and looked out over the yard. My cousins mingling with my team, people laughing again, the tension mostly gone. They were still the same people. But I wasn't, and I hadn't come back for revenge. I came back to remind them who I was all along. The engine hummed softly as I sat in the driver's seat, parked at the edge of my old neighborhood. The last of the party had faded in the rearview mirror, and the laughter now echoed only in memory. The sky above was deep indigo, scattered with stars barely visible through the suburban haze. I leaned back, resting my head against the seat, letting the silence stretch. It was finally quiet. No cousins jabbing with sarcastic jabs. No parents reminding me to be more realistic. No buzzing notifications demanding I fix something, pitch something, prove something. Just me and the low rhythmic pulse of a life I had built on my own terms. I thought back to the basement. The cheap whiteboard, the cold floor, the nights I went to bed hungry because ramen wasn't even in the budget. I remembered walking deliveries in the rain, shoes soaked, heart heavier. And that night, God, that night, staring at the ceiling, whispering to myself that maybe they were right. They weren't. I smiled to myself. They say success is loud, but this moment felt like a whisper. A steady breath after years of drowning. Not a billboard, not a trophy, just peace. I didn't come back to show off. I didn't need to. The Porsche, the clothes, the team, they were never the point. They were symbols, reminders, of the kid they dismissed, the dream they laughed off, the hours they never saw, now they had seen. And that was enough. No bitterness lingered in my chest. No need to rub it in, no urge to gloat. The funny thing about winning is, the real win is when you no longer need to prove it. They would go back to their lives. Some would ask for favors. Some would pretend they always believed in me. Some would forget again. Didn't matter. I knew what I had done. I closed my eyes and exhaled. I didn't need revenge. I just needed them to see what I became when no one was looking.